Rosh Hashanah is about life and death and the judgments we make in between. How far would you go to risk your life to help someone else? How far should you go to risk your life to help someone else? Our rabbis dealt with this very question of life and death and our responsibilities. How far should you go? There's a story in the Talmud that is purposefully succinct. It presents a scenario in which there are two men in the desert trying to get home, but they are lost and they are far from civilization. One of them has a full canteen of water and the other has no water at all. It reads almost like a case statement. The given that is established by the rabbis is that survival of one relies solely upon one of them maintaining and drinking all of the water. But if they should share the water, both of them will assuredly die. The rabbis ask the question, what is the appropriate response to this impossible situation? Well, one rabbi insists that the two must share the water, even though it means that they both will certainly die. He insists it is better that both of them drink and die, rather than one of them seeing the death of the other. But another, the great Rabbi Akiva, insists that the proper action can only be that the one whose canteen it is must be the one who keeps it and drinks it, so that at least he survives, even though he must do so knowing it will lead to the death of his friend. Akiva draws upon a text from Leviticus to prove his point. V'chai achecha imach, your brother shall live with you. And then he adds his commentary, in this moment, your life takes precedence over your fellow's life. How does Akiva arrive at this understanding from these words from Leviticus? Because as we learn, these words are understood to be the proof text for tzedakah, charity, our responsibility to share our wealth with those who are in need. Now, our tradition is very clear. According to the 12th century Maimonides, the highest form of tzedakah is to teach someone a trade or a means for making a living. Why? Because an individual's ability to provide for him or herself is central to Jewish philosophy. We are created in God's image, and like God, we are creators and producers. We are not meant to exist on our own, but we are meant to be able to provide for ourselves to the best of our ability. And from another part of the Talmud, Jewish wisdom teaches that regarding raising children, one of a parent's prime responsibilities is to teach their child a trade, to make them industrious and self-reliant. And here, the Talmud adds that some even teach that a parent must teach their child to swim. This deep and powerful drive towards self-reliance is not for the sake of some altruistic strongman perspective. Rather, it is because the very essence of being a human being is the achievement of, or at least the striving for, our potential. Our tradition implores us to understand this is the only life we get. We are not living for something that happens after we die. We have been endowed not only with inalienable rights, but inalienable potential. Every one of us carries a uniqueness of talents and abilities that nonetheless rely upon our volition to bring them to fruition. And moreover, the better we care for ourselves, the better we are able to care for others. Now, throughout the Torah, there's a long list of obligations in terms of our responsibilities to each other. Throughout the Exodus story, we hear time and again that we are always to keep close to heart that we are to love the stranger, for we were strangers in the land of Egypt. This is one of the essential teachings of Jewish tradition, and of course, at the same time, we have this tremendous expectation that we must also care for ourselves. It's a balance. It's an important balance that we are called to strike time and again, So when we return to the text that I began with, 2 men in the desert, one with a canteen filled with water that is sufficient for one to make it back to safety, but if shared, both would surely die. I wonder, how would I react? How might you react? What does it feel like to consider this idea that there is an outer limit to what we must do short of endangering our own lives? The rabbis ask how much tzedakah one should give, and there are many opinions offered. In these discussions, they consider the extremes, from the most ascetic, who seek to rid themselves of all of their wealth, to the most miserly, who wish to never give anything away. Our tradition provides us with these bookends, neither of which is acceptable. In one case, a very wealthy but rather ascetic man once boasted to his rabbi about his 1 meal a day of bread with salt and a jug of water. But he was castigated by the rabbi, told to go home and partake of meat and other delicacies and aged wine. Why? The rabbi's students asked. The rabbi taught, because if he dines on meat and wine, he will at least think he must offer the poor bread and water. But if all he survives on is bread and water, what will he give to the poor? Stones? In another case, Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch once surprised his disciples with the news that he had booked a trip to Switzerland. Perplexed, his students asked him why such a journey was so important. In response, he explained, "When I stand shortly before the Almighty, I will be held answerable to many questions. But what will I say when God asks, and God is sure to ask? Shimshon, did you see my Alps?" Along these same lines on the radio, I recently heard a great quote. "One day I will go to my Creator, and the Creator will say, 'Show me your wounds.' And if I have none, my Creator will say, 'Was there really nothing worth fighting for?'" These stories channel core principles in our tradition. We are a people that seeks to bring repair to the world. It is the mandate that is placed upon us, starting with God's instruction to Abraham to Lech Lecha, go forth into a land that is unfamiliar to you, leave everything you know, and become a blessing to all those who know you. That's the call. That is what we are asked to do. And yet our tradition is very clear that there is a limit to our generosity. In asking how much charity one should give, the Talmud is very clear that there is an outside limit. We cannot give so much away that we become wards ourselves. We are not allowed to relegate ourselves to poverty, such that we are then in need of the help of others. And this is why Rabbi Akiva insists that the only appropriate response in this very narrow set of circumstances is that the one whose canteen it is the one who must keep it and drink it. Because to do otherwise would be to impoverish oneself. Now, I believe that Rabbi Akiva recognized the remarkable uniqueness of a moment such as this, that rarely, if ever, will this extreme situation arise, but it is there to mark this boundary, to remind us. And I know this is a strange teaching to raise on Rosh Hashanah, when we are focused on liturgical affirmations of generosity and openness and sacrifice, that our first responsibility is summed up by the flight attendant's instructions. If there is turbulence in flight and the air masks drop from the ceiling and you are traveling with a child, place your mask on your face first and then the child's. Why? Because in that extreme circumstance, if you first try to place your child's mask on their face, you risk the real possibility that neither of you gets it on. Some of you may have noticed that we made a change to the order of our liturgy this evening. Usually, the Hineni prayer is offered early in the service. Instead, we switched it with Avinu Malkeinu, as I wanted this message, my message, to proceed and prepare you for the Hineni prayer. Traditionally, this prayer is offered by one of the prayer leaders, and Hannah does it so well. She does it so well that sometimes I wonder if we are so focused on the beauty of the song that we miss what the prayer is about. Well, it is a plea for humility from the prayer leaders. But in this moment, I believe that all of us are shlichei tzibur, public messengers before God. In it, we beseech God to guide us, to accept our imperfections, our sins, our transgressions, to look past our brokenness, to still receive our pleas on behalf of this community. It is a prayer in which we plead with God to hear our voice, to allow our petitions to arrive at God's heart, to receive us with gentleness and kindness, even as we and God recognize that we are broken. I chose to open Rosh Hashanah this year along these lines, and yet this time in the service, because I want us to think deeply about humility. Now, humility is certainly about ego management. It is a practice, a set of reminders for how we must, or at least how we should remain mindful of our limitations. Humility is what pauses us from saying the wrong thing at the wrong time in the wrong place. Humility keeps us in check, reminding us that we may be tremendously talented, highly educated, deeply experienced, and when we nonetheless don't get the job or the promotion or the admission, that we are still worthy and whole, because there are 1,000 different reasons that led to them choosing someone else. Humility is the reminder that just because we dreamed it and worked toward it, but nonetheless fell short, we are still worthy of the task. And it is what allows us to draw the lessons embedded in the experience that perhaps only we could. Humility is the reminder that no matter how successful we are, nobody got here on their own. It's like the game I play sometimes with students when teaching them about saying motzi, the prayer over bread. I ask them to imagine how many people were involved before that piece of bread got into their hand. From the farmer who tilled the ground and planted and watered the seed and cared for the crops and cultivated the wheat, to those involved in cutting it down, bringing it to a mill, separating out the chaff, grinding the seed, to bagging the flour, to delivering it to the bakery, and then you can imagine so many more. Humbling, isn't it? All to provide me with a lovely toasted piece of sourdough bread, with a layer of cream cheese, and the perfect over-easy egg. Sorry, I got caught up. Humility, the recognition that we do have the capacity to take care of ourselves, and that we are yet a part of an organic structure within which and because of which our lives are better and more fruitful and more rewarding, is what drives so much of what leads us towards good action or bad. Humility is the essential element I want to encourage us to think about during these next 10 days. Now, one more Hasidic teaching, and that is that we are to move through the world with two pieces of paper in our pockets. One that says, I am but dust and ashes, and the other one that says, the world was created for my sake alone. One goes in one pocket and one in the other. When we are feeling down and out, when we are lost and forlorn, we take out the one that says, the world was created for my sake alone, reminding ourselves of our divine birthright, that this is my world, my opportunity, that the only things standing in my way are the limits of my imagination. But when we are feeling haughty and so sure of ourselves that humility isn't even the slightest consideration, we're to take out the other piece of paper, the one that says, you are but dust and ashes, to remind us, you ain't all that. You must make room for others. That, as I also say often to my students, God gives us 2 ears and only 1 mouth to remind us that we should strive to listen twice as much as we talk. I ask you now all to please rise. For this is a preparatory moment. I'm inviting you to take seriously these words, to allow them to pierce your heart. Invite them in to flow through your mind and stimulate your imagination. Invite them in to flow through you. Some of you may have spent quite a bit of time considering what you bring into this moment as we embark upon the High Holy Day journey. And for others, this may be just the beginning. No matter where you are on this journey, invite yourselves into this moment. These days, this liturgy, the music, the sermons, the teachings and readings, no matter how well we execute them from up here, they only matter when they resonate within you. And allow me to offer this prayer in anticipation of the next. In the year to come, may you and those you love never find yourselves in harm's way that would require emergency decision-making for the sake of life. I pray that this scenario is just a theoretical construct that challenges us to think seriously about how we live our lives, especially when there isn't anything urgent requiring our attention. When we have the time and the focus and the inclination, how do we choose to spend our precious but limited resources of time, attention, and focus? And what do we do to deepen and enhance the sources that fuel our humility? To regularly remain aware that I and everyone I know deserves to say, the world was indeed created for my sake alone, and that everyone I know is required to recognize I'm just dust and ashes. Please turn to page 16. Here I am, one soul within this prayer community. Like those around me, I bring my own concerns and yearnings to this place, hoping they will find expression in the time-hallowed words of my people and in the traditions cherished by generations before me. May I bring the best of my energies to these holy days, approaching this spiritual work with open heart and mind, sincerity and sustained focus on the deep questions of this season. Who am I? How shall I live? Where have I fallen short or failed? This night I take up the challenge of the days of awe, cheshbon nefesh, a searching examination of my life, a moral inventory of my deeds, words, and thoughts. During the next 10 days, let me face the truth about myself and listen to your still small voice, taking comfort in your promise that I am always free to change, released from staleness and routine. Let me know the joy of beginning again. May I gain strength as I share this task with those around me, united by our common purpose, tikkun midot, improving our characters, and tikkun olam, repairing the world. Prepare myself to pray, one soul amidst this whole congregation.
אשר שלחוני, אף על פי שאיני חטאי, ואגון לך, על כן אבקשך, אלוהי אברהם, אלוהי יצחק, ואלוהי יעקב, רחום וחנון, אלוהי ישראל. אדוני, רחום וחנון, אלוהי ישראל. שדי, הנה מצליח דרכי, אשר אנוכי הולך לעמוד לבקש רחמים, לבקש רחמים עליי ועל שלחי, כי אתה